My name is Catherine. I'm 32 years old and I live in New York City. 3 months ago, my best friend of 20 years knocked on my door with a cream-colored suitcase and tears in her eyes. She said her boyfriend had kicked her out and she had nowhere to go. I opened my home to her because that is what I thought loyalty meant. 90 days later, she sat beside my husband in an Upper East Side coffee shop, touching his sleeve like she owned him, while he slid divorce papers across the table and told me to sign. He thought I would cry. He thought I would beg. He thought I would walk away with half of what he decided I deserved. He didn't know I had already called a lawyer. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you are right now. I remember that afternoon with painful clarity. The coffee shop was on the second floor, overlooking a wide avenue packed with yellow cabs and impatient horns. The setting sun hit the glass windows and turned everything gold, but inside, the air felt cold enough to freeze my hands. Jason sat to my left. Allison sat to his right. Allison had been my friend since 3rd grade. She had eaten dinners in my mother's kitchen. She had hugged me when my father went into the hospital. She had stood beside me at my wedding, wearing champagne silk, smiling like she wanted my happiness more than anything. Now her bright red nails rested gently on Jason's suit sleeve. The divorce papers were stacked in front of me. The Upper West Side apartment, the SUV, the joint savings, the furniture. Every line was written in clean legal language, cold and precise, like the end of my marriage was just a business receipt. "Sign it, Catherine," Jason said. His voice was not angry. That made it worse. It was flat, impatient, like I was wasting his time. Allison tilted her head and gave me that soft, fake sympathetic look. "Catherine, you can't force the heart. If love has run its course, it's better to let it go. What we have is real." I looked at her for a long moment. This was the same woman who had stood at my door 3 months earlier, crying so hard she could barely speak. "I don't know where else to go," she had whispered. I had pulled her into my arms. I had made her tea. I had given her the guest room. I had told Jason she's family. Now she was trying to replace me inside the home I paid for. I turned the divorce papers page by page. Jason's lawyer had divided everything confidently. Too confidently. The apartment was listed as marital property. The SUV was treated as shared. The joint savings were split down the middle. There was only one problem. Most of what he was trying to divide had never belonged to him. I placed the papers back on the table. "I'm not signing." Jason's face tightened. "Catherine, don't cross the line." Allison leaned forward. "Think carefully. Clinging to someone who doesn't love you anymore will only hurt you both." A small laugh escaped me. Dry, empty. "Now you're giving me clichés?" Jason frowned. "Stop talking in riddles. I've made my decision." "I know," I said. "And because you made your decision, I'm making mine." I reached into my purse and took out my phone. Jason's eyes narrowed. "Who are you calling?" I didn't answer. I dialed. A man picked up after one ring. His voice was calm and formal. "Daniel speaking." I looked directly at Jason and Allison. "Daniel, I need you to come to the coffee shop. I've decided to get a divorce, but from now on, I set all the conditions." Allison's hand froze on Jason's sleeve. Jason leaned forward. "What, Daniel?" I hung up and took a sip of water. My throat was dry, but my voice was steady. 2 weeks earlier, I had discovered everything. Jason had told me he was flying to Boston for a 3-day business meeting. He packed his bag the night before. That morning I left for work like usual. But my meeting had been canceled, so after waiting 15 minutes in the lobby, I went back upstairs. I thought I would surprise him with breakfast. Instead, I heard Allison laughing behind my bedroom door. The door was slightly open. Their voices came through clearly enough for me to understand exactly what I had become in their story. A boring wife. A woman who only knew how to work. An idiot who trusted both her husband and her best friend. I did not throw the door open. I did not scream. I did not collapse. I walked downstairs, sat on a bench in the courtyard, and stayed there for 3 hours. The sun was warm, but my hands were freezing. An elm leaf fell on my shoe, and I stared at it like it was the only real thing left in the world. At noon, I called Daniel. Daniel was a corporate attorney who had worked with my firm for years. To most people, I was just a project manager. but I had spent 8 years building my reputation inside that company. I understood contracts, I understood numbers, and more importantly, I understood proof. I asked Daniel to investigate 3 things quietly: our joint account, the SUV purchase, and the apartment documents. 3 days later, he brought me a dossier thick enough to change my life. Jason had drained almost $50,000 from our joint account over 7 months. He moved the money in small amounts, first into his personal account, then to Allison. Some transfers said loan, some said help, some had no note at all. The SUV he claimed was a company vehicle was actually in his name. The $20,000 down payment had come from our joint account without my written consent. And the apartment? It was mine. My parents had gifted me the down payment before the wedding. The deed was in my name. Every mortgage payment had come from my personal account. Jason had simply lived there long enough to start calling it ours. That was the first time I understood something ugly. Some people do not build with you. They stand inside what you built and start measuring how much of it they can take. Back in the coffee shop, Daniel arrived with a black leather briefcase and a young secretary carrying documents. He sat beside me and gave Jason a polite nod. "I am here as Miss Catherine's legal representation," he said. "From this moment forward, I suggest all discussion remain focused on documents, figures, and legal grounds." Jason gave a bitter laugh. "Wow, you really prepared this well." "If I hadn't," I said, "I would have signed papers dividing things that were never yours." Allison shifted in her seat. "Catherine, don't be harsh. Jason only wanted this to be amicable." I turned to her. "You sleep in my house. You spend money from my marital account. You wear my clothes. And now you dare talk to me about being amicable?" Her face went red. Daniel placed the first document on the table. "The Upper West Side apartment is separate property. The deed, down payment, and mortgage history all support that." Jason snapped. "Once you're married, one person's money belongs to both." Daniel did not blink. "Not when the origin is this clearly documented." Jason looked at me like I had betrayed him. "You hid this from me." I almost smiled. "You lived there for 3 years and never asked whose name was on the deed. You only care now because you want half of it." Daniel continued. "The SUV requires review. The $20,000 deposit came from the joint account. Miss Catherine never signed consent, converting marital funds into your private asset." Allison tried to interrupt. "Jason uses the SUV for work." Daniel turned to her. "You are not an interested party in these proceedings. Please refrain from speaking on his behalf." The sentence was quiet. It was also devastating. Then Daniel reached the account transfers. Over 7 months, nearly $50,000 was withdrawn from the joint account. A significant portion was transferred from Mr. Jason's personal account to a third party. Nobody said Allison's name. Nobody needed to. Jason slammed his hand on the table hard enough to rattle the water glass. "I loaned money to a friend. What's wrong with that?" "A friend?" I asked. "Whose friend?" "My friend who needed my husband to secretly wire her thousands of dollars." The cafe went quiet. Allison burst into tears. "Catherine, please don't say these things in public. I know I did wrong, but we didn't mean to hurt you this much." I stared at the face I had known for most of my life. "There are people you think you could recognize with your eyes closed," I said. "But betrayal teaches you that familiar faces can still be fake." Jason tried to pull control back. "Let's go home and talk privately." "No," I said. "When you brought divorce papers here to pressure me, you didn't want privacy. When you drained our account, you didn't want privacy. Now you want privacy because you're losing." Daniel pushed the divorce papers back toward Jason. "This draft no longer has negotiating value. Miss Catherine will send a corrected proposal with asset inventory, repayment demands, and legal documentation." Jason didn't touch the papers. Allison no longer touched Jason. That was the first time I saw it. Their unity was only strong when they thought I was weak. I stood up. "Jason," I said, "what you took from me through deceit, I will take back item by item." Then I walked out. Daniel followed me down the stairs. Outside, the evening wind hit my face. It smelled like traffic, rain, and the florist shop at the corner tying sunflowers into bright yellow bundles. Daniel asked, "Are you okay?" I watched the cars pass. "I'm okay," I said, "but this is not just about divorce anymore." Because there was one more thing. On Jason's laptop, I had found files from my company. Internal budgets, client lists, confidential project data, draft proposals that had never been released outside our secure server. Jason had been sending them to a competing firm to negotiate a better job for himself. At Daniel's office that night, I handed him the USB drive. He reviewed the files for 10 minutes, then looked up with a face that told me everything. "This is no longer just a marital issue," he said. "If these documents are real, Jason may have transferred proprietary company data to a competitor." I felt the pain hit me all over again. I had spent 8 years building trust inside that company. I started at entry level and worked my way up to project manager. I had defended every timeline, every client, every exhausted team member pulling late nights. Jason had used my access, my trust, and my silence as a ladder. "What do you want to do?" Daniel asked. I looked out the window at the headlights moving below. "If I stay quiet," I said, "people who trusted me will suffer." The next morning, I wore a light gray suit and walked into my company at 8:15 a.m. I took the elevator to the 12th floor and asked to see the executive team. Inside the conference room were the VP of Operations, the General Counsel, and the VP of Projects. I placed the USB drive on the table. "I need to report a security breach," I said. "The employee involved is Jason." The room changed instantly. The General Counsel opened the files. I watched her expression move from caution to concern, to something much heavier. "Are you certain this came from internal servers?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I managed that project. I know every file." The VP of Projects leaned back slowly. "If this is true, this is corporate espionage." The VP of Operations looked at me. "Catherine, be honest. Are you involved?" The question hurt, but it was fair. "No," I said. "And I am reporting this now so there are no misunderstandings later." He studied me for a few seconds. "I believe you." That one sentence almost broke me. By noon, Jason's access was revoked. By 12:17 p.m., his name flashed on my phone. I answered. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. "My job. Work is work, Catherine. Personal is personal. You don't mix them." I laughed once. "You mixed them first." That night, Jason came to the apartment. His suitcase was waiting by the door. I had folded his clothes carefully, piece by piece. Nothing missing, nothing damaged. I was not trying to hurt him. I was trying to remove him. He looked at the suitcase, then at me. "You actually did it." "Yes. The company is investigating me." "I know. You didn't have to take it this far." "I didn't take it anywhere. I just stopped hiding it." Then came the request I knew was coming. "Help me," he said. "Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Say I took the files by accident." I looked at the man I had once loved. "You are asking me to lie for you again." He stepped closer. "Catherine, please." "I'll lose everything." "No," I said. "You already gambled everything. Now you're just seeing the bill. If you have ever been expected to protect someone who destroyed you, drop 'I'm done' in the comments." Because that was the moment I finally understood. Boundaries aren't revenge. They are protection. Jason signed the corrected settlement 3 weeks later. The apartment stayed mine. He returned the SUV deposit. He repaid his share of the drained account, and every dollar traced to Allison. The company terminated him after the forensic audit. The competitor withdrew their offer when legal notices arrived. Allison disappeared from my life faster than she entered it. She sent one message. "I hope one day you understand love made us confused." I deleted it. Love did not confuse them. Entitlement did. 6 weeks later, I sat across from Jason in Daniel's law firm. No Allison. No soft voices, no touching sleeves. Just documents, signatures, and consequences. Jason looked thinner. His shirt was wrinkled. His confidence was gone. "Do you really feel nothing for me anymore?" he asked. I answered honestly. "I feel memory, not love." He stared at the table. "If I sign this, will you stop making my life hell?" "I never made your life hell," I said. "You did this yourself." He signed. When it was over, he stood at the door and said, "If you ever need help, let me know." I looked at him one last time. I don't need it anymore. The door closed behind him. And just like that, the loudest chapter of my life ended in complete silence. I walked out of Daniel's office into bright morning sun. New York had not changed. The cabs still honked. People still rushed down the sidewalk with coffee cups and phone calls, and lives that had nothing to do with mine. But I had changed. I went to a small coffee shop, ordered iced tea, and sat by the window. For the first time in months, I was alone, without feeling abandoned. I texted my mother. "It's done, Mom." She replied immediately. "Good. Come home for a few days, sweetheart." I smiled. Allison hadn't stolen my husband. She had taken a man who no longer deserved to be beside me. Jason hadn't destroyed my life. He had only exposed the parts of it that were built on trust he never earned. What I kept was not just the apartment, not just the money, not just my career. I kept myself. And sometimes, after betrayal, that is the greatest victory of all. If this story resonated with you, comment your story or just write, "I'm here." And subscribe for more stories about people who stopped begging for loyalty from people who had already chosen betrayal.